And get out, move around a little bit. It's really simple, really easy. It's going to be fun. You may even break a sweat on a Sunday morning. Who knows what's about to happen? So, everybody say, higher than the sky. Your love is deeper than the sea. Your grace is washing over me and calling me your own. You're going to have to do a little twist. That's how we used to do it growing up in church. You see the twisters coming through the altar. You just watch out. Just watch out because Brother Twister's coming through. All right, so that's pretty much, that's the bulk of this motion song today, okay? Higher than the sky, your love is deeper than the sea, your grace is washing over me, and you're calling me your own. So I want everybody to point back to the sound guy and say, or well, computer guy, multimedia guy. Say, hit it, multimedia guy. I need the video higher than the sky. There we go. You guys ready for this? Hands up, clap. Here we go. There we go. Here we go. Higher than the sky. Here we go. Deeper. And just clap while I fix this.
Picture these words, that's a Snapchat. Boomerang with the praise in the right back. Man, we higher than the sky, no turn back. If it be our last night, leave it all here. No fear, be clear, this is your year. Let go of anything that isn't God's steer. By Zine with a dream, and it's so clear. Yeah, so clear. And you know wherever you go.
There we go. Just had to turn it upside down. Here we go.
Hug it out like a sumo when I never think twice. You the boss of my life, no, you go. And this world not down with us. They can try to limit me, but it's down to us. Man, love so deep, not again to us. When the blessing comes down, man, the praise go up, yeah.
Deeper than the sea. Woo! All right. Sister Julie, were you watching for the adults who are participating the most? Those are your next volunteers. I saw a few. That's good. Awesome. All right. You guys can head back to your seats. But don't sit down. Don't sit down. Because we're about to sing a song, and the song that we're about to sing is a song that I woke up this morning thinking about. It was on my mind. And I know we've already done a little bit of worship. My worship team can come out with me this morning. Thank you so much. They learned this song last minute. Aren't they the best? And so we're going to sing a song this morning. And it may be a little familiar to it, and it's very easy. You'll catch on pretty quickly to the song. And so once you catch on, go ahead and feel the freedom to sing along with us this morning, okay? Can you do that for me? Can you do that, church? All right, here we go. This morning thinking about that. Here we go, verse 1. Awesome. Okay, now you can sit down. Now you can be seated in the house of the Lord today. Oh, man, listen, I'm just trying to make a point that church can be fun sometimes. And when we're focused on our kids thinking that church should be the best, most exciting place of the week, we should put a little oomph into our step coming into church. Make it fun for them. Make it exciting for them. And I know, obviously, this is a different Sunday. You're kind of being introduced to some of that kids' fun in the kids' church that they have downstairs when you guys are doing Sunday school and such. But it's okay to have a little fun and smile and such. Probably is the first time you guys have smiled all week. So it's okay. It's okay. So listen, I want to play a quick little game with you guys, and we're all going to participate in this game. And listen. You'll be comfortable because you won't have to do anything. You can stay seated, okay? What you have to do, though, is when I call out what answer you choose, it's going to be game show style, okay? You're going to just raise your hand, and then we'll see the correct answer, okay? So the name of this game is called Name That Fear, okay? So everyone say, Name That Fear. All right, so let's see what our first fear is. First fear is acrophobia. Could be the fear of heights, fear of flying, or fear of water. Raise your hand if you think it's A. Raise your hand if you think it's B. Raise your hand if you think it's C, fear of water. Okay, let's see what the answer is. Fear of heights. Nicely done, nicely done. I saw a little, it was quiet though. All right, number 2. Now forgive me, I'm not a doctor. And these are silly words. But nephophobia, fear of ice or cold, fear of tables, fear of clouds. All right, who thinks letter A, fear of ice or cold? Okay. Fear of tables? You never know. Fear of clouds. Okay, let's see here. Answer, fear of clouds. Nice. Nicely done. All right, number 3. Alectorophobia. Alectorophobia. There we go. Alectorophobia. Fear of people named Alec, fear of chickens, or fear of cars. Let's see here. Fear of people named Alec. Raise your hand. Really? No one? Okay. All right. Fear of chickens. That would be letter B. Fear of cars. Letter C. All right. Let's see the answer. Fear of chickens. Nice. I think this is the most clapping I've heard all morning. This is awesome. All right, number 4. You guys should play more like trivia games shows more often. All right, peladophobia. Peladophobia. The fear of flowers, fear of goats, fear of bald people. You can't write this stuff. Okay, here we go. Fear of flowers. Raise your hand if you think it's fear of flowers. Okay, fear of goats. We got a few ones on that. Fear of bald people. All right, let's see the answer. Fear of bald people. Well, luckily there's not too many people with peladophobia in here. All right, next one. Arachnophobia. A, fear of water. B, fear of spiders. C, fear of the sun. So let's say A. B, fear of spiders. C, fear of the sun. That's right, you stand strong. Let's see what the answer is. Fear of spiders. Yes, that is definitely a more popular one there. Everyone knows about arachnophobia. Number 6. Omphallophobia. Omphallophobia. Fear of belly buttons. B, fear of toenails. Or C, fear of clowns. So do we have A, fear of belly buttons? B, fear of toenails. C, fear of clowns. Okay, let's see the answer. Fear of belly buttons. Now, this is real, okay? This is the fear of someone actually touching your belly button. You have a fear of someone walking down the street next to you and reaching out to touch your belly button. It's okay, that's what that fear is. So, just to inform you a little bit about that. Number 7, last one here. I've been practicing, so give me just a second here. Hippopotamonstrossus equipedalophobia. Nailed it. Fear of hippos, B, fear of monsters, or C, fear of long words. A, anybody for fear of hippos? Okay, we got a few. B, fear of monsters, a few. And fear of long words, letter C. All right, let's see the answer. Fear of long words. Could you imagine walking into the doctor's office and they give you this diagnosis and they write it out for you on like the list and you have to look at it every day? You're like, Doc, listen, I think I have a fear of long words. They're like, here you go. Here's your diagnosis. And they're like, I can't look at it. It's too long. So, name that fear. There's some pretty silly fears, huh? But did you know that God actually gave us some good and healthy fears we should have? You can take that down now so we're not distracted by that very long word. But God actually gave us some good, healthy fears. Like, for example, the fear of snakes. That's a good, healthy fear, right? Because if not, you would go picking up snakes like they were earthworms, and you would get bit. And I know there's some poisonous snakes around here in this area. So you wouldn't want to do that. Another good, healthy fear would be the healthy fear of bears. You wouldn't go walk up to a bear, and a mama bear, and cuddle her like a little teddy bear. No, because she would want to cuddle you back, and you wouldn't like that. You would not like that. And last night, we found out that everyone's got a good, healthy fear of lightning. As we were out in our S'more Jesus family devotion, and we could see off in the distance, there was the lightning flashing and going through the clouds. And so I was kind of watching and looking around, and all the parents would see, and they'd be like, all right, Pastor Milligan, let's wrap it up. Let's go. All right, let's do this thing. Okay, so that's good, healthy fears that God put in us to keep us safe and honestly to keep us alive. And so we have good, healthy fears. But then, as we see from our game, there's just some silly fears that we just get caught up in. Silly fears like of belly buttons and toenails and clowns and, well, no, that's a legitimate fear. Bald people and fear of clouds and things like that. And so there are some things like silly fears. And so I remember as a kid, as a young boy, feeling that feeling of fear and how overwhelming it was sometimes to be afraid of things that were out of my control, to be afraid of situations and things that really just, it overcame me, it overwhelmed me, until I learned how to really trust in God. And so I want to tell you a story this morning. I want to tell you a story this morning of a young man named Jonathan. And Jonathan was actually a prince. His father was the king of Israel, and his father's name was Saul. Anybody ever heard of King Saul? King Saul was actually not a very good king at all. He was appointed king, but then he quickly got to the point where he thought he could do things on his own without listening to God's commandments and obeying God's word. And so it got Israel in trouble a lot of times because of King Saul's decisions. And there was this big army, this awful, terrible army called the Philistines army. Everyone say Philistines. Now, if I say Philistines in the story, what I want you to do is I want you to make like a pirate sound, like, arr, every time I say Philistines, okay? Why are the girls only ones doing a great pirate sound? Are there any men in the house today? Give me a good arr. So when I say Philistines, you say arr. Okay, so the Philistines were awful, terrible people. Thank you. That was good. Perfect. Now, once I say it, you got to be done with it so we can move on with the story. So they were awful, terrible people. And they were so awful, when they would attack the Israelites, they would take their cows, their chickens, their horses. They would take and steal their food and burn their crops. And they would even steal and kidnap their blacksmiths. And blacksmiths were people that worked with metal. And in the Bible days, all their weapons were made out of metal, like their swords and their spears and their arrows were made out of metal. And so if they didn't have any blacksmiths, then they couldn't have any weapons. And the Philistines, oh nice, actually, they took all the weapons out of Israel, leaving only two, King Saul's sword and Prince Jonathan's sword. And so Prince Jonathan, he came to a point where he got tired of the Philistine army, attacking the Israelites. He got so tired of it, and Jonathan knew deep down, he knew that the Israelites was God's chosen people, and that he would take care of them. And so Jonathan grabs his armor bearer. His armor bearer is somebody that they stick right next to royalty, whether that be a prince has an armor bearer, a king has an armor bearer, and they would carry their armor, which was really heavy, and they would carry their bags or their weapons or anything they needed, and they would stick next to that prince or that king wherever they went, even into battle. That armor bearer was a loyal partner. And so he calls his armor bearer over, and they go into the tent. They go into the tent to have a secret conversation. It's a secret conversation. They don't want anyone to listen because they're about to come up with a plan. And so Jonathan gets into, it was probably a much larger tent than this one. This would be awkward with two people in it. And so they're talking and saying, listen, I will have a plan. And they're whispering because they don't want anyone to hear. And this is it. I want to attack the Philistine army. Shh! Don't let them know we're in here. And I want to attack the army. But listen, don't tell my father, King Saul. And the armor bearer, he looked at Jonathan right in the eyes. And he said, Prince Jonathan, you go ahead. I am with you wherever you go. I will be by your side until the end. He was committed. He stuck by his side. And so they begin to come up with the plan, and they're thinking the plan, and Jonathan says, aha, I have the plan. Here's the plan, armor bearer. We're going to climb down into the valley and see where the Philistines were at. The Philistines, I'm regretting my decision. No, the Philistines were up top of a hill, and in the middle was this big valley, and then there was the Israelites on the other side. And they could kind of see each other, and the Bible says that the Philistine army was so big that it was like the sand of the seashore. It could not be counted how many men were part of the Philistine army. And the Israelites only had 600 people in their army. 600 people, that's it. And so they come up with the plan, and the plan is that, listen, armor bearer, this is the plan. Shh, stay quiet. We're going to go down. We're going to crawl down into the valley, and we're going to crawl over to that side of the valley where the Philistines are watching. And we get there, and we're going to show ourselves to the soldiers watching over the valley. And when we show ourselves, they'll either say, hey, stay there and we'll come down to you, or they'll tell us to come up to them. And if they say come up to them, we'll know that that is a sign from God that He has delivered the Philistine army into our hands. And so they did that. So they snuck out of the tent. And they snuck down into and they crawled down and they stayed in the shadows. They stayed in the shadows. Because they didn't want anyone to see them. And slowly moved around the boulders, around the rocks, until they got all the way to the side of the Philistines' army. Now here we are. Armor bearer, they're right up there. They're right there. And so, gotta wait. Are you ready? You ready to do this? We're going to show ourselves We're going to show ourselves in 1, 2, 3. Ha ha! Hey, Philistines! Here we are, you booger-eating, sock-smelling buffoons. Maybe that's not exactly what they said, but it just sounded good in the moment. And so the Philistines saw them. They were roasting marshmallows at the time, so it caught them off guard. And so the Philistines saw them down there, and they looked down, and they're saying, hey, look at those Israelites. It looked like they crawled out of their little wormholes this morning. They didn't really like the Israelites so much, so that was kind of like an insult. And so the Philistines looked down, and they, good, a few of you are sticking with the story. And so they look down, and they say, hey, Israelites, why don't you come on up here? We'll show you a thing or two. You see what I said? Oh, forget it. And so Jonathan and his armor bearer, he says, Jonathan, armor bearer, that was it. That was the signal from God. They told us to come up. That was it. God has delivered the Philistines to us. And so they begin to climb up the hill, hand over hand, foot over foot. And as they're sweating, their heart is racing, filled with excitement, but fear, not knowing, maybe even reconsidering their very poorly thought out plan of attacking them, just 2 of them with this ginormous army. And they finally get to the top. And they're covered in sweat and dirt. And Jonathan cleans off his hands because he's got to get a good grip on the sword. And he draws his sword and he begins to battle the Philistines. He begins to fight and begins to slash and thrash and stab and kick and punch and smack. And he grabs them down, and the armor bearer grabs the sword of one of the slain Philistines, and he begins to fight along back to back with Jonathan. And they do this, defeating 20 Philistines, just the 2 of them. I don't think the Philistines are making that noise right now. But they defeated 20 of them, just 2 young men. And some of the Philistines, they ran away back to their camp. They go running back to the camp, and they don't know what's happening. They think it's a whole army of Israelites coming to attack them. And so they begin to warn the other soldiers and telling them, the Israelites are coming to attack us. Hurry, get ready for war. The Israelites are coming to attack us. And at that same time, God sends an earthquake to the Philistine camp. And so the Philistine camp begins to shake and crumble. That's perfect. And they begin to shake. And their tents begin to shake and collapse and fall down. And the trees are shaking and rocks begin to shake. And it causes so much confusion. And it causes so much panic in the Philistines' camp that they begin to fight one another. Philistine versus Philistine. They begin to fight one another with their swords, slaying one another, bringing one another down. Some of the Philistines just begin to run away in all sorts of directions. And Jonathan and his armor bearer, alone, 2 young men, are standing there, wondering, really, what is happening right now? What's going on? And all of this commotion, all this panic, all this fighting, it gets louder and greater until the Israelites on the other side of the valley can look over and see something's going on over there. We can actually hear all the fighting and all of the uproar over in the camp. What is happening? And so they let King Saul know. King Saul, there's fighting over there in the camp. Are they being attacked? And King Saul calls for a head count. He says, count everyone's head. Make sure everyone is here, all 600 of them. And so they begin to count, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 600, 598. King Saul, there's 2 men missing. And King Saul, it's Prince Jonathan and his armor bearer. They're missing. We don't know where they're at. And so King Saul quickly rallies up the troops, and they get suited up with their armor, ready for battle, and they charge over the valley. They charge in to the Philistines' camp. And when they show up and they get there to the camp, it's Jonathan and his armor bearer, surrounded by fallen Philistine men. Like it's just one. It was like a whisper. So dramatic. And it's just Jonathan and his armor bearer standing in the camp, surrounded by fallen men and their enemies. Because that day, God saved Israel by two young men that trusted in God more than they feared their enemies. Two young men who trusted in God more than they feared their enemies. Everybody say fight. I want to talk to you for a few more minutes as we wrap up. And any music or anything like that can get ready. It'll be just a few more minutes here, but I want to talk to you about fight. And in Deuteronomy 20, verse 4, it says, "For the Lord your God is the one who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to give you victory." God is the one who goes before you to fight for you against your enemies. And you know, I grew up in church, so I feel like I kind of have a little bit of say in this because I grew up in this. I was born and raised right on a pew in church. I'm 31 years old. I've spent 31 years of my life in church. And I can say this knowing that sometimes the church paints, and this is a blanket statement. This is not just for your church. The church sometimes paints a really pretty picture of what it looks like to live for God. And we paint a picture that says, hey, living for God is great. Come to church because your family will be perfect and everything will be perfect and you won't have to deal with the struggles and the fights and the battles that you deal with out in the world. But that's just not true. We fight the same fights that people who choose not to live for God or live in this world. We battle the same battles. We fight the same spirits. We fight the same enemies. The only difference is we have the Lord our God fighting for us. Amen. And we need to make sure our children know that living for God is a fight. It's a battle. And battles are bloody. And battles you get wounded. And battles you get hurt. And battles you get knocked down sometimes. Our kids fight through spiritual warfare on a daily basis when they step foot into their schools, step foot outside of this church, step foot outside of the home. They are going through spiritual warfare. And we have to train our children to fight. They have to know that God is on their side. They have to know that they are not the only ones fighting this battle. Fighting the battle of fear and anxiety and depression and confusion and doubt. Our students and teenagers fight these battles. They need to know that they're not isolated. They're not the only ones fighting the battle, but that there are others with them fighting, and that the Lord, their God, is fighting for them. I want to tell you a quick story about a friend of mine named Sheree, and make sure you have those pictures ready for me, please. Sheree is 12 years old this year, and she's a good friend of mine. Sheree was born with a very rare disease. They're on the desktop. Sheree was born with a very rare disease. There's actually only 11 known cases of this disease, and unfortunately, very few of those 11 have even lived past a few years old. And Sheree is 12 years old, so she is a walking miracle today. A few years ago, Sheree was just getting her routine ears and eyesight check for school leading up to it, and the doctors found that she was actually almost blind in one of her eyes and that she was almost deaf in one of her ears. Now that's a terrible thing, but for Sheree, this was even more terrible because Sheree wanted to be a worship leader. And Sharaya sings beautifully. Her mom is one of the leaders of worship at her church. And she sees her mom and she looks at that example, and she wants to be a worship leader. And she has a beautiful voice, and she leads worship in kids' church. And so to think that I'm not going to be able to play because I can't see, and I'm not going to be able to sing because I can't hear. And then on top of all of that, she was going into another surgery. At this point in her life, she has already been through over 30 surgeries because of her disease. Over 30 surgeries, and another one was coming up, and they don't get any easier. And so she's found out this news. Now she's about to prep for another surgery in a few weeks. And Sharaya becomes overwhelmed with fear and anxiety. It affects her so much to the point that now she can't even sleep at night. She wakes up in the middle of the night with panic attacks. She wakes up in sweats, crying and screaming and yelling for her parents. And they would come and they would comfort her at night, and they would pray for her at night. And Sharaya even started sleeping with a Bible. And in place of a little teddy bear, she would sleep with her Bible in her hands. And we prayed for Sharaya. We prayed over a prayer cloth, and we believed in faith and put it in her pillow. We did everything we knew we needed to do. We truly believed that God could heal Sharaya. But this went on until one Sunday night we were having worship service. And it was a great worship service. It was awesome. Nobody was really kind of pushing it a little bit. Nobody was inviting people to the front or anything. It was just some great, good worship. We were all enjoying the presence of God. And Sharaya, by herself, steps out and begins to walk down the aisle. No one asked her to. No one told her to. Nobody else was even up at the front. And she made her way down to the front. And she began to lift her hands and begin to worship. And as she began to worship, there was just... I remember this. I was there. I was right there in the front, and I saw this all happen. I remember just this beautiful spirit of liberty and freedom that swept into that church. And it changed the atmosphere. Because while Sharaya was worshiping, she was worshiping the God who fought for her. And she was learning to put her trust in God. She was worshiping God, and through her worship was showing God that I cannot fight this on my own. And honestly, God, whatever you choose to do, I'm good with. And she surrendered every fear, every worry, everything that she was carrying. And she surrendered it to God that night through worship. Now that night became a beautiful worship service, and it was a powerful move of God. And Sharaya and her family did what you typically do after Sunday night service. You go out to eat. And so they all loaded up.